Well folks, it's that time of year again, and boy have Glebe Farm got something planned for this year for the kids. I always find it a really odd time of year. I'm getting to be more and more cynical about Christmas as more time goes on, but at the same time I really do like the fact that I do love the lights. You know, the contrast between light and darkness is fantastic. We never taught our kids at any point anything about Santa. It was just something that we never entertained, and I don't know whether you've ever had this, but we were treated as freaks for not telling our kids that there was a Santa Claus. Do you know, I've been here for over 2 years now and I still haven't been into Dave's gym. Some people think that this guy is me. Would you believe that? They see a picture of this guy and think I'm some kind of fitness fanatic. Well, good evening folks. I thought I'd come to the village centre. This is just a 2-minute walk from the farm. And Asbury Village do not like to be outdone when it comes to lights, but considering we're looking at the whole theme of the Holy Spirit and lights, I thought that this would be quite a location. Anyway folks, we're going to get into these questions, and hopefully it's going to make for some really good discussion. I hope you're enjoying looking at the Holy Spirit and the Holy Spirit's role in the world. I find it absolutely fascinating, and although some of it in this last study has crossed over to in the church as well, next week's we're going to be looking at the Holy Spirit in the Old Testament, how it came on individuals, and then the week after that we're going to be looking at the Holy Spirit's role in the virgin birth. So that's where we're headed with this, and then of course the week after that I think Christmas falls on Sunday. So let's get straight into this together. I want to start by looking at Genesis chapter 1 verse 2. Genesis 1 verse 2. And I just want you to compare the description of the earth being formless and void with your life, and try and draw some comparisons between the two. It's a fascinating little thing that you can see that even within Genesis there's almost a kind of a midrash of our lives, of what we were like and how we were made new. And of course, when the command comes, let there be light, time starts. It's really fascinating that time begins when God says, let there be light. So when the earth was formless and void, it's kind of like time hadn't even started at that point. It's very interesting. Okay, so just compare the earth before God spoke, before the Spirit that brooded over the face of the deep did, the Triunity did their creative work. Compare the old earth to the new earth and our old life to our new life. See if you can draw some comparisons there. Actually, I can see without putting my light on. Okay, so number 2 then, Number 2, have a read of John chapter 3 verse 5. We looked at it on Sunday morning. And Jesus tells Nicodemus that flesh gives birth to flesh, but spirit gives birth to spirit. And I want you to try and think of examples of that law that Jesus, it's a phenomenal law when you think about it. It was Louis Pasteur that said that life begets life. That's how we figured out the pasteurizing of milk and so on, that if you want to stop the spread of germs, you have to understand the very simple thing: life begets life. But in the same way that life begets life, that the Holy Spirit, life begets life, well, flesh is only ever going to give birth to flesh, and spirit is only ever going to give birth to spirit. So just think of examples of these, both in and out of the church, where flesh gives birth to flesh and spirit gives birth to spirit. And when we look at flesh, we can look at our flesh, how it works in the biological sense, but also flesh in the sense of the New Testament, of the kind of fallen flesh, if you like, the old nature giving birth to the old nature, and spirit giving birth to spirit. Hope that makes sense, but give examples of whenever you've seen that, because the contrast is startling between the two. Okay, number 3 then, have a read of 2 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 4. 2 Corinthians 11 verse 4. 2 Corinthians 11 verse 4, the Apostle Paul warns the church that even by that point, another Jesus, another gospel, and even another spirit was being taught, was circulating around the churches. So the question is, how can you safeguard yourself against another spirit? There's no doubt that even within our churches, from time to time, you see another spirit at work. Over the years, I've seen it. How do we safeguard? We looked at some of it on Sunday morning. How do we safeguard ourselves against another spirit in regards to the Holy Spirit? Okay. Number 4, have a read of these together. Fit these together like a jigsaw puzzle. Psalm 119 verse 105. Matthew chapter 5, 14 and 16. Matthew 25, 1 to 13. And 1 Samuel 3, 3. Okay, practically speaking, how do we fill our lamps with oil? Practically speaking, how do we fill our lamps with oil? We used to sing the song in Sunday school, give me oil in my lamp, keep me burning. And of course the oil definitely speaks of the Holy Spirit. So practically speaking, how do we fill our lamps with oil? Okay. Number 5, Romans 8:11. Romans 8:11. Has the Holy Spirit ever quickened your mortal flesh? Has that ever happened to you? If you've ever experienced anything along those lines, please share it with the group. It's a dynamic verse in Romans 8, that the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead dwells in us, and the Spirit can quicken the mortal flesh. A friend of mine who kept bleeding from his backside and was in and out of hospital, and things were getting worse and worse. He was in hospital one day and he read this verse, and he kind of prescribed himself this verse as medicine for whatever was going wrong with him. And when they came to do the tests, they found, they basically told him, there's something seriously wrong with you, that you're bleeding from your back passage all the time. When they came to do the test, there was nothing whatsoever wrong with him. This was over 2 years ago, and nothing's happened ever since. But he took this verse, that the Spirit can even quicken the mortal flesh, for himself as medicine. Okay, so has that ever happened in your life? Okay, let's move on. Number 6, this takes a bit more thinking about. 1 Kings 18, 24 to 39. You've got the whole account of Elijah on Mount Carmel, okay? Now that begins with the rebuilding of an altar and a sacrifice, and ending with a fire falling. I want you to think about 1 Kings 18, 24 to 39 in the light of the cross and Pentecost. So 1 Kings, where Elijah, the offering and so on, with the fire, with the cross, and what happens in Acts chapter 2 on Pentecost, the fire. I want you to just compare the two and see what you can draw out as parallels between the two. That's more kind of going off-piste and skiing on the black slopes. What can you find in there? Okay? Next week we're going to be looking at the Holy Spirit in the Old Testament, and it gets wondrous, glorious. Okay, next one is this. Luke chapter 11 verses 9 to 13 and John chapter 14 verse 16 are two sides of the same coin. Two sides of the same coin. In Luke 11, 9 to 13, Jesus tells us to ask. In John 14, 16, it's Jesus that asks the Father. They're two sides of the same coin. What do these verses teach us about receiving the Holy Spirit? Okay? And then finally, Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20. Have you ever put a ceiling on the work that the Holy Spirit can do in your life? Read the verse together. It's a tremendous verse. Have you ever put a ceiling, or has somebody else put a ceiling? Now, when I say ceiling, remember, we looked at this on Sunday morning, the Holy Spirit is a spirit of truth. The Holy Spirit will always declare the Lord himself, will bear witness to Jesus, and the Holy Spirit will always glorify Jesus. So be careful when answering this question, but nevertheless, have you or anybody else ever put a ceiling the Holy Spirit can do in your life? And remember, whatever the Holy Spirit does in your life will always, always, always glorify Jesus. Okay, folks, hopefully you'll have a great time looking at those questions.